I really started research recently on looking at the tomato, and it might seem strange that I've chosen a rather simple object like the tomato to address big issues in the world. But if you look at the way that the tomato has changed, it reveals things about the whole nature of our society, our economy, our relationship with nature and the environment. And what I was doing was taking the tomato and seeing how it changed in the course of the 19th and 20th centuries. It was a process of revelation for me, because I discovered that the tomato had been a pioneer in mass consumption and mass production. It led the world in advertising long before Ford came along with cars. And so it was a way of understanding how there were major changes in the world as we know it. And in the UK, it was the supermarkets and the dominant supermarkets, your Tesco's and your Sainsbury's, that also transformed the tomato. The tomato that we see is a Tesco tomato or a Sainsbury's tomato, and they are different. And so what we see in the UK is very different from what we find in Greece or what we find in the USA or what we find in Brazil. And my research has been fundamentally driven by a view of looking at change through a comparative and historical lens, and choosing quite simple objects often to understand the nature of these changes. Following all the work on the tomato, I really wanted to get involved in what I think are now the major changes of the world that are happening in the world. First of all, we're looking at global climate change, which threatens our whole ecosystem. It threatens the way that we produce food, and it threatens, obviously, the whole of the way that the economy develops. But I also wanted to look at changes that are resulting from the fact that the 21st century is probably going to be the century when we realize that we're living in a finite world with finite resources. And the most important example of this is the fact that we are facing oil and the depletion of oil and everything that flows from it. Everything that's plastic in this room, everything that we drive around in, the planes that we fly, are all dependent on oil, and it's running out. And that is going to result in major changes in the way the world is organized, how we move, how we meet each other, and all of the kind of social fabric that we've come to accept. And lastly, there's a question of food. And food is going to be a major, major issue, also making demands on the use of land across the world and its resources, water, and so on. And we know that we're going to have to feed roughly 50% more people. We're going to go from 6 billion to 9 billion people to feed, and many are currently, roughly a billion are currently undernourished. And this is going to mean absolutely massive changes in the way that we use the land as a resource in the world. So here again, my research is looking at the way in which different countries, different regions are responding to these three big challenges: the challenge of food, the challenge of energy, and the challenge of global climate change. And I think it's very important that we at Essex, as social scientists, are engaged in a collaborative, interdisciplinary, and global approach to global issues. We need big social science to deal with the big issues of the day.